This is Isaac Morehouse. Welcome to the podcast where we discuss education, entrepreneurship, big ideas, how to put them into practice in the real world, and above all, how to live free. Praxis is proud to sponsor this episode of the podcast. Praxis is about living the life you want, living on your own terms, getting off the conveyor belt. What does that mean specifically? If you're a young person, high school, college age, you've kind of been taught that there's a conveyor belt. You sit down, you shut up, you obey the rules, you get good grades, and you'll be moved along and then eventually handed a ticket to a job and a house and 2.5 kids and a bunch of debt. That's bullcrap. You need to create your own life. You need to decide what you want. Look at the opportunities around us that are more plentiful than has ever existed in the history of mankind. And you need to get out and start exploring and experimenting. Stop doing things you hate. If you're bored in the classroom, if it's not bringing you any joy, get out. Engage with the world. Try some things. If you get accepted into Praxis is a highly competitive program. But if you get accepted in, we will place you with an entrepreneur at a growing dynamic business where you'll be working 30 hours a week. At the same time, you'll be going through a series of professional development challenges to meet your goals that you've set out. You start the program and say, here's what I want at the end. Here are the tangible outcomes. I want a job offer. I want to launch an online business. I want to, whatever it might be. We take that and use that as our measuring stick to decide whether we're doing our job. Our advisors work with you to reach those goals. They help you, they push you, they challenge you like a fitness trainer would. But ultimately, you're the one in the driver's seat. We provide you with an amazing curriculum, resources on everything from liberal arts topics like economics and history to business, entrepreneurship, life skills, and digital branding, building a website. It is intense, but it will change your life. DiscoverPraxis.com. Check it out. All right. Today, I am really excited to talk with my friend Peter Neiger and his wife, Anna Loehnig. Is that how you pronounce your last name, Anna?
Oh, it's actually Loehnig. It's German.
Loehnig. L-O-E.
Yeah, everyone says Loehnig though, so it's all right.
H-N-I-G. Okay, Anna Loehnig. Peter, if you have checked out the book, Why Haven't You Read This Book? You will note his name from one of the chapters, Why Haven't You Quit Your Job? And if you haven't checked out that book, you need to. You can go to Amazon, Why Haven't You Read This Book, and look it up. And Peter has a wonderful chapter about quitting your job and taking just leaving for a better life, and it's a really good chapter with a lot of really interesting, sort of a really philosophical approach to taking control of your life and kind of doing the things you've always wanted to do. So, Peter and Anna, they are traveling across the country by bicycle right now, and so we're going to get into more about how they ended up there and all that stuff as we go along. But I want to start with right now in the present. Where are you guys currently?
We're currently in the town of Orange, Texas, right on the Louisiana border. Okay.
And what has today consisted of so far? It's about 3 p.m. right now. So what have you done so far today?
Today's a little abnormal because we're actually stranded here because there's flash flooding and tornado watches throughout the region. So we had to get a hotel and we're just bunkering down until tomorrow when we hit the road again. But today has mostly been we've both done a little bit of work. We have online jobs, and then just kind of prepping our route and getting ready for the next leg into New Orleans.
Okay, so staying in a hotel in Orange, Texas for a day.
It was an emergency. Yeah.
Is that as scary as it sounds? I'm picturing like Bates Motel type of movie scene.
There was a lot of loud noises last night and a lot of people wandering around, and someone apparently had a fish fry out on the balcony, like on the shared walkway. But, other than that, it's been good.
So do you know how long you're going to be hunkered down?
Just till tomorrow. The weather's supposed to clear up, so we should be able to hit the road by noon tomorrow.
Okay. Yeah. So today was a work day. Do you rotate? Like, do some days you ride all day long, and then other days you work all day long, or do you take a couple hours here and there? What's the typical pattern?
Yeah, that sounds about right. We just kind of play it by ear. Some days we bike all day, and then if we ever stop at we do couch surfing. So if we're ever at a couch surfer's house or a friend's house, a family member's house, we take advantage of the electricity and internet to get work done. And other times we just kind of have to stop because we need to get work done. So then maybe we'll try to find a Starbucks or some other type of coffee shop and just bunker down there for like a day. Sometimes we do half days where we'll bike, maybe 10 miles into a city, go to the Starbucks, work, a few hours, and then bike another 10 or 15 miles out of the city.
So you don't have necessarily like a pattern that every week Tuesday is like this and Wednesday is like this. It's very short-term planning.
Yes.
Yeah, we tried to stick with a kind of like 4 days on, 3 days, like 4 days riding, 3 days of working. But cities just aren't located where you need them to be sometimes. So really our entire life, we just play it by ear. Like we never know where we're going to be in the next 24 hours, where we're going to be stopping.
Well, so when I sent you a calendar invite for this interview like 2 weeks ago, I'm impressed that you were like a slave to that for the last 2 weeks. We've got to find a way to get to Orange, Texas so we can do this interview. So if you can share, I don't know if there's any reason it would be confidential, but your jobs. Anna, let's start with you. What do you do? What's your online work and how does that bring in an income for you?
Well, I'm actually a registered dietitian, and my first job that I got right out of college, like after I graduated, was a job for this Australian company called SP Health, and they do a lot of online, like they run different health and fitness websites in Australia, the UK, and here in the US. So I first started working for them freelance, like I was just working from where I lived in Missouri, even though they were based out of Australia. And I did that for about a year, I think. And then I ended up moving to LA and working in the office for them full-time for a few years. And then when this idea for the bike ride came up, I asked them if I could go back to, just doing it like from home or from the road, since I'd already done that for a year. And so, they trusted me and they said that was okay. So, wow. Yeah, it was really lucky, and it's just part-time now, obviously, if I don't have time to be full-time anymore. But
so do you have the flexibility to set like how many hours you work and you just get paid for when you're working, or do you have to perform certain duties or clock certain hours every week?
It kind of depends. Like last year I was trying to do 16 hours a week, and this year they kind of have moved to just whatever needs to be done. Like I can work as much or as little as, as there is work to do. So, right now it's a little less than 16 hours a week.
Okay. Yeah, it's interesting.
It's very flexible, and I can really do it just whenever. Sometimes it's something a little more urgent, but usually it's just something that needs to get done within the next couple of weeks. So I can just do it whenever I have time.
It's really amazing when you mentioned, you were working in an office, but the work you were doing apparently didn't require being in an office. And then you asked, is it okay if I do this? Yeah, is it okay if I do this elsewhere? And they said yes. And I had a similar experience personally, and it sort of made me wonder how many other people could do this. And in my case, I was afraid that if I asked, this was back several years ago, well, not that many, 3 years ago or so, or 5, I guess, when I worked for IHS, and I was traveling all over the country. I was very independent, and the colleagues I worked closest with, they were traveling as well. So we were rarely all in the office together. It didn't really need to be. And I was afraid if I asked, can I move away and do this, they would say no. And so instead, I just told them. I just said, sort of said, hey, my wife and I are thinking about moving. And then, okay, well, we'll have to talk about that. And then I kind of brought it up again. Hey, we're looking at houses. All right, well, we'll talk about how that, might work or whatever. And I think I was afraid to ask because they would say no. And I think they were afraid to tell me no because then they thought I might quit. And so it was like this perfect scenario where like I was never actually given permission to go leave, but it just sort of
just kind of did it.
And I wonder how many people could do that. Man, I think there's got to be a lot. Now, Peter, what about you? What is your current way of earning cash?
I work for a company called Civitas. It's actually based in Charleston. But I don't think any of the staff member actually live there. We all kind of live everywhere. And I do data research and analysis. We primarily work with nonprofits and like local governments because there's all this kind of bureaucracy you have to deal with when dealing with the federal government. with like money distribution. So I helped them navigate that bureaucracy really. And it really came about because I posted one day on Facebook that I like working with maps. And one of like a friend of a friend contacted me and said, hey, we're doing some data analysis on maps. Do you think you could help us out? I know you're biking on the road. So when I started the bike ride, I didn't have a job. I just figured it would take care of itself, or I would get somewhere where I wanted to stop for a few months and build up savings and keep moving. And at the time Anna was working, we realized like worst case scenario, she could bring in the income while I take care of all like the logistics and planning and other stuff we had to do.
So just in very practical terms, I'm assuming both of you get paid via like direct deposit to a bank account somewhere, and then you just use a credit card or a debit card, or you go get cash from an ATM whenever you need it?
Yeah.
And do you have what kind of like do you have anything that requires you to have an address? Like if you have a cell phone plan, for example, they usually want like an address to bill or something like that. Do you have a permanent address that you keep somewhere, or a PO box?
We've just been using my parents' address
Sure.
since it's a permanent one, and my parents are nice enough to let us know whenever we get mail there, and they either forward it to us wherever we are. A lot of post offices do general delivery, like you can have something mailed there under your name, and if it says general delivery, they'll hold it for you until you can come pick it up, which is really nice. We've used that a few times.
And so, I mean, you probably don't need it for, like, you probably don't have any utilities besides a cell phone or something.
No, the cell phone's the only one. Actually, the only time we have,
insurance.
the only time we have problems dealing with having a mailing address is if we're dealing with any type of like government bureaucracy, like whether it's taxes or the new health insurance stuff. Like those have been the biggest pains because they need like signatures, or they need. It's
so funny how that stuff. It's so stuck in such an age of the past. I remember when we're first setting up Praxis as a legal entity and setting up a bank for business, and I had the guys of a company doing my accounting, which actually my brother's company. They were in Michigan, and I was in South Carolina, and we were incorporated in Michigan, and on our website, it had a physical mailing address that was South Carolina, because that's where I was, and if anybody was mailing anything, like that's where I wanted it. But because we were registered in Michigan, the bank, it was actually, they would not get our account set up until the address on our website matched the address we gave them when we first started setting up the account, because the Department of Homeland Security required them. I guess if you're a terrorist, you put a different address on your website than on your bank papers, and that was, the only thing standing between, us committing acts of terror was the address listed on our website. So it can be pretty arcane. Okay, so before we zoom to the full background, give me a little bit more of the future. So what does the next, let's say, 2 weeks to a month entail for you guys?
We'll be heading into Baton Rouge we found some couch surfers to stay with for a few days. That'll probably take us 4 or 5 days. And then we're going to go down to New Orleans and see a friend of ours from Burning Man and stay with her for probably a week. And then after that, we're just going to kind of bike along the Gulf of Mexico till we get to like Tallahassee, Florida, and then head north up towards Charleston, D.C., and all that area.
So this is someone you met at Burning Man. Are you sure it's a real person and it wasn't someone you hallucinated while you were
actually?
Give her a ride.
Yeah, actually, it was kind of a crazy scenario. She met. I don't know if you know Gabrielle, Alexander McCoben's wife.
Okay, yeah.
Where she had a friend named Cheyenne who was going to Burning Man and needed a ride. So it was like a friend of a friend contacted us like the day before we were leaving for Burning Man and just asked if she could get in the car with us. We're like, sure, why not?
Yeah, we had room.
So she drove up the 15 hours or whatever it is, and then we stayed in touch since then. And
so
she's really awesome.
Okay, so this is this reminds me of a question that I've had for a bit. Since you started your biking across the country and this very interesting nomadic lifestyle, has your opinion of sort of human nature as a whole, or the culture we live in, has it changed? I mean, because it seems like couch surfing and things like that require, I don't know, maybe a level of trust that's slightly higher even than, say, an Airbnb or something like that has a more, large centralized company that has a reputation at stake. And just kind of like relying on friend of a friend who said you can stay there. Are you more trusting of people, or have you experienced the opposite? Have you experienced people trying to steal your stuff when you're in a certain city? And do you feel like the world is more dangerous, or is it basically the same outlook you had when you started?
I would say I've found that people are more trustworthy than you think. I think the overwhelming majority of people are good, and any like bad things you hear about happening, I think those are really like overplayed, and they get a lot of attention. But we've never had anything bad happen to us. Like we've never had anything stolen. And every experience we've had with couch surfing has been great. We've met some really cool people, and we've had people just approach us at gas stations and ask if we need a place to stay, and just offer up their yard for us to camp in, or their
spare bedroom sometimes. Yeah. Like people have invited us into their house when they see us just sitting on the side of the road having lunch.
That's amazing.
And then they'll be like, hey, like we met a couple in North Dakota that had a pecan farm.
That was in Missouri, actually.
Or is it in Missouri?
Yeah.
And they saw us at a gas station, and they're like, hey, we've got this spare bedroom. We're empty nesters. Come on down. We had dinner with them and hung out on their pecan farm and like picked pecans off the trees, and it was just a great experience.
That's absolutely amazing. I mean, it's so fascinating how different people are face to face than they are in sort of this theoretical world or just blips in the news. Yeah. I sort of call it the curse of Thomas Hobbes, like this idea that absent some centralizing force, some big authority wielding a stick, making sure everyone's nice, everyone will just be trying to kill each other all the time. And yet, if you've ever been in a city right after a tornado or a flood, or somebody has a relative that died, people that have never met each other, more often than not, they just start helping. They just rally around. They reach out. I mean, people obviously can do terrible things at different points, but I just find it amazing how relatively easy it is to get somebody to help you if you're in need. Now, has anyone ever given you sort of like the indentured servant pitch, like, "Hey, come garden for me, and I'll give you a room"?
No, not really. We have stayed with people where like a family in Oregon had a farm, like a vegetable farm and animals and stuff, and we helped like pick the vegetables for our dinner that night. But it wasn't
fun though.
But yeah, it wasn't like an indentured servant thing. It was more like, hey, do you mind going over and getting some of the potatoes out of the potato garden? It's like, sure.
Would you mind digging them out of the ground? And we're like, yes, we would love to do that.
Oh man. Okay. So I want to go back in time, because you guys seem so like at ease and comfortable with your, nomadic lifestyle. But I'm sure that wasn't always the case. So what was the genesis of this? And I guess we can go one at a time. Whoever wants to go first. What was sort of the beginning of this process of getting you to a point where you were comfortable traveling across the nation by bike?
You can go first,
okay,
maybe, because you did. You did it before I did.
Because Peter, when I met you, we were both in Washington D.C. at the time, and as you know, that's a very difficult city for many people to escape from, especially if you have a decent job. But you did. What started that process?
I did have a pretty good job with a fantastic organization, Students for Liberty. It's probably the best organization I've ever worked for. But I was really unhappy in D.C. Like, the culture didn't fit really well with me. It's fairly expensive. And I saw that everyone either stayed there for 18 months or they stayed there for 18 years, it seemed like. There was just like...
It's like you have a window. If you don't get out before, a certain amount of time, you're never going to go.
Well, yeah, because you get trapped in that. You're getting paid a good amount of money. You finally move out of the junkie of apartment, but now you can't quit your job because you need the income in order to stay in the fairly nice apartment. And it's just like this vicious cycle in that town. So in 2012, I basically quit my job and did a solo bike ride from D.C. to Los Angeles over the summer.
Now, were you a big biker already?
Nope, I'd probably never put more than 20 miles on a bike.
So what made you decide? Quitting your job is one thing, and you talk about that in your book. But what made you decide I'm going to bike across the country?
It was a mixture of, I don't know. When I was in the Army, this goes back a little ways. Like when I was in the Army, I was in the 82nd Airborne Division, which is the All-Americans, and they got the name because they were the first unit to have soldiers from every single U.S. state in it back in like World War I. So me and some soldiers in Afghanistan were just like on a mountaintop talking about that and how most of us had never really left our home states. And we all said that we wanted to visit every state at some point. So now you fast forward to when I'm quitting D.C., I don't really know where I want to go. And I don't have a driver's license because my driver's license expired and I never renewed it. So I literally, by requirement, either had to take a plane or I had to find another form of transportation. And if I flew to L.A., I still didn't have a job waiting for me in L.A., so I just didn't have things figured out. So I just figured I'd take a chance, bike as far as I could, and got across the country.
So you really biked across to buy yourself time to figure out what you were going to do when you got there.
Yeah, and then when I got there, I figured out what I want to do was bike.
You're like, oh, the journey is the destination.
Yeah.
Okay, but that wasn't, so you biked across, you got to LA, and then you stayed put for a couple years, didn't you?
Yeah, I stayed there for almost 2 years,
Yeah.
year and a half, 2 years. That's where Anna and I started dating and stuff.
Okay, and during that 2 years, was it always the plan to get back on the road as soon as you can, or did you originally think you were going to settle in LA for a while?
I thought I was going to settle in LA for a while. I got a pretty decent job as kind of a corporate job in the industry down there, doing private security and investigations. And, my boss was great, but it just really, I wasn't a good fit for it. And I realized that pretty quickly, that I wasn't happy going into an office every day, commuting an hour and a half each way, being forced to put on a collared shirt and things. I wasn't happy no matter how much money I made. So we decided, after Anna and I were getting serious, I was really considering leaving and just kind of completing the 48-state tour. And we were serious enough that I invited her along.
So, Anna, how did you end up in LA, and how did you end up deciding to go along with this crazy idea? Or had you already biked the country as well?
No, I did really love biking. I'm from St. Louis originally, and basically I went to college in Missouri as well, and it was a pretty small college town, so I would use my bike as my main form of transportation there. And then I lived in St. Louis for about a year after I graduated, and there was a really nice paved bike trail where I was living, and there was one summer where I biked probably 40 to 60 miles almost every day. I was just kind of obsessed with biking. And I moved to LA because my job offered me the full-time position in the office there, and I was definitely ready to get out of Missouri by then.
Yeah.
I'd spent 22, 23 years there, and I was definitely ready to go see the rest of the country. So LA was the starting point, and then when Peter asked me if I wanted to come with him, I was like, that sounds amazing. I love biking, and I loved moving to California, and thought it'd be great to see the rest of the world, or the rest of the country, I should say.
Once they make bikes that can, cross the Atlantic, you guys will be,
Yeah.
I'm sure. So when you were still in Missouri and you started, you said you biked. How much did you say just on that trail? You were just biking all the time?
Oh, yeah. I was just biking. Well, St. Louis probably still isn't the most bike-friendly city. So, yeah, I just biked, on the trail because it was the safest.
What was it about when you started doing that? Is there something about biking that sort of, does it give you a feeling or a sense of accomplishment or freedom, or is it just sort of like a form of meditation for you? Now maybe it's purely utilitarian, although I doubt you'd be able to do it as much as you guys are if you didn't get some sort of joy out of it, or if there wasn't something to it deeper than that. But when you started doing that, what was it about biking that you just really enjoyed?
I'm not really sure. I think it was a combination of all the things you said. But I do know that it's definitely not just a form of exercise or anything. It's way more than that, because I've tried biking on the stationary bikes, and that is not for me. That is so boring. So I think part of it is just being able to, it allows you to see new things as you go, and kind of at the right speed. It's faster than walking, but much slower than driving in a car, so you kind of get to see your surroundings at a really nice pace. And I love to listen to music while biking, and Peter kind of turned me on to the idea of listening to podcasts or audiobooks. Yeah, just you can listen to anything while you're biking, which is, I don't know.
It's interesting that because I found that walking, if you're in a densely populated city, Charleston is a great example of this. It's a small downtown, and if you drive through it, you're like, that was kind of cool. If you walk through it, if you walk down say, South King Street or whatever, it's an entirely different experience because the scale changes. everything is at the scale of someone who's walking, in these older cities especially, because they were designed for this sort of slow movement. And so you see these little portals into a little garden that you couldn't see if you were driving. And so the changing of the speed, it kind of changes the scale at which you experience your environment. And the United States is so unique in that most cities are not that old. Most of them are built in the age of faster transportation, and they're a little bit more spread out. And a car is still a little fast to experience most of them, but walking is a little slow. Like nobody's going to walk across Houston, But a bike, it seems like a really interesting way to kind of experience many cities and frankly the countryside in the United States at a speed that's almost enough where you can make the progress necessary to not just be stuck in the same cornfield for hours on end, but slow enough to really take it in. I don't know. I haven't done it at length. I mean, I used to bike this trail that was maybe 30, 40 miles in Michigan from where I lived in Kalamazoo to Lake Michigan. I used to bike that every year. And that was just a really interesting experience because you couldn't walk from there to Lake Michigan in a day. But you could bike it in a day. But it was so different from driving there. It's so different. There's all these little towns that you don't notice when you're driving through. So anyway, that sounds really interesting to me to kind of go ahead, Peter. It sounds like you.
I'll say there's also just a psychological difference when you don't have a screen in front of you. You don't have a windshield. You're smelling everything. You're hearing natural sounds. You're feeling all the bumps of the road and the pavement while you bike over it. There's an avenue in Northern California called the Avenue of the Giants where all the redwoods are. And we biked that. And I just can't imagine what the point would be of driving it. Because when you're buzzing by at 60 miles per hour, it's just trees going by quickly. But for us, we were like, oh, look, there's a giant redwood tree that we can go stand inside of on the side of the road. Oh, you can smell the moss and the oak and everything that's going on around you. It's just, I don't know, it's very different than driving. Driving is very utilitarian if you're trying to get from point A to point B, but you don't experience the actual.
I'm a huge, I love driving on the open road. I used to drive all over the crisscross the state of Michigan for different jobs that I had, but I love that experience when I'm on the highway and there's no other traffic and I'm free because I like being in control of what I do. I don't like being contingent on other people, but when you're stuck in traffic, you feel like a total prisoner when you drive. And I can kind of see biking being, because it's powered solely by you, you're even more connected to you are in control of what you do, how fast you go. To my knowledge, it's pretty rare to be stuck in traffic as a biker. Maybe it happens. Okay, so you get to LA, you guys meet, and at what point did you have the conversation, hey, maybe we should pull up roots and go bike the country?
I think it was after I'd been working for about a year, a little bit over that. I'd realized that I wasn't happy there, and I didn't really like any of my job opportunities there. So I basically told Anna that I was planning on doing that, and if she wanted to come, that'd be great. We were living together at the time, I think.
I think so.
And then she agreed to do it.
Hadn't you jokingly invited me to come on your first bike ride with you?
Oh, yeah, because we actually...
we'd only known each other for a week.
Anna and I actually met at my going away party in D.C.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah.
So, before your
before that, and we just
bike ride.
coincidentally happened to both be moving to L.A. within a month of each other because she was still in St. Louis at that time.
All right.
So she moved there, and then you just caught up once you finally rode all the way across the country.
Yeah.
So when you set out, did you have a time limit or a plan? We're going to do this for 6 months and come back to L.A., or we're going to try to find a new city to settle in, or was it let's just do this indefinitely?
The original plan was to try to travel with the season, so go up north during the spring, be in the northern states during the summer, come down, and we thought it would take us about 18 months total. But then
we were just a little bit off.
Yeah, then we adopted a dog that weighs 55 pounds, and that slowed things down considerably because it turns into the spiral where you have to carry enough food and water for the dog, which is heavier, which means you're moving slower, which means you can't reach new towns as quickly, so you have to make sure and stock up more on food and water.
And that slows you down even more.
Yeah,
it's like the snowball effect.
So where's the dog? Are you pulling him in a trailer?
Yes.
Yeah, we have a trailer that hitches we have two trailers, one with all of our camping equipment and food and stuff that goes on the back of Anna's bike, and then we have a full-size dog trailer that attaches to the back of mine.
I feel like that dog is living the life that dogs dream about.
He's visited more states than most Americans. Right?
Do dogs hang their head out the window when they're biking too, or is that only in cars?
Yeah.
No, he hangs his head out the right hand side and just like whimpers when he sees cows because he loves cows and like smells things and he loves it. He hops right in his trailer 80 or 90% of the time, ready to go.
Okay, so when did you leave LA? How long have you been on the road?
We left LA in April 2014. And so we've kind of been doing this in like sections because like as we said, our original plan didn't work out like because we moved so much like slower than we thought we would. So by the time we made it up north, it was already starting to get cold. So we made it to Missoula, Montana that first year.
Oh, that's a beautiful place.
That was a fun city.
We ended up having to stop there because we got there and then we went to Burning Man and then we came back and it was already starting to frost at night in early September. So we were like, all right, we're a few thousand miles away from where we need to be in the south and we can't do it in time before winter comes. So yeah, we just like rented an apartment and stayed there for 8 months and then we set off again.
It's so fascinating to hear you say things that you don't hear people say normally. I probably haven't for 150 years, which is, oh, we can't travel to our destination because the frost is coming. It's like winter's coming. We got to wait another season. So what did you do for those 8 months in Missoula?
Anna went back up to full-time work at her job just online.
I was really lucky that they were able to let me go back to full-time. It was great.
Yeah, and then I got a part-time job at a grocery store, which was actually really nice because we got like half off groceries and they provided full medical and dental. They paid for my vasectomy and everything. It was
man, that was it's like, okay, here's our 2-year trip. We're gonna stop in Missoula, get a quick vasectomy, and then we're gonna. So
wasn't part of the plan.
Well, yeah. So how? Okay, I have a couple questions here, and I got to decide the order that I want to ask them in. Not about the vasectomy. How much money does it take? Like right now, what does your lifestyle cost you? How much money does it take to, like, what do you need to earn per week or per month, if you don't mind me asking, to sort of maintain what you're doing? Are you socking away some in savings, or are you basically spending everything you earn as you go? What's the financial side look like?
Generally, we spend about everything we make, and we run about $2,400 a month for both of us. Yeah. We could do it much cheaper than that. We spend money on beer. We get hotel rooms. Sometimes we don't need to.
I've seen the pictures on Facebook of your beer and Oreo parties.
Yeah.
So you guys, but it's really interesting though that you say, oh, we're kind of we're kind of splurging. We're at $2,400 a month, and I mean, from DC, Peter, and certainly from LA, $2,400 a month is like a 1-2 bedroom apartment.
Yeah, well, that's how much I spent just on myself in LA, at least per month. So it's definitely cheaper.
So we don't put a lot of money in savings now. Every now and then we'll have a month where things tend to be a little bit cheaper. We both got like Roth IRAs that we put a little money in if we happen to have anything left over. But that's kind of the exception to the rule. We're not going into debt over it.
It's interesting how your perspective changes once, I would suspect, and correct me if I'm wrong, you end up in Missoula, it's going to be longer than expected, so you just, get a job. You got these, Peter, you sort of Facebook posted about maps, you end up with an online job. You sort of have realized by doing this, I'm suspecting, that it's not that hard to maintain a decent standard of living. You've seen enough cities to know there's lots of different ways to live at lots of different income levels. I suspect that not like socking away money in savings is not really scary to you anymore because you sort of are aware of your own power to earn more money if you need to at any time. Or is that not true?
No, that's very true.
Yeah. We could live so much cheaper. Like, it would be very possible for us to basically go to a bean and rice diet with some vegetables and stuff to maintain us. Like, when you realize how cheap you can live your life, a lot of things feel like splurging. And you realize that it's not that scary that if one of us, because it's possible that one of us will lose our job while we're on the bike ride. Yeah. And we'll be fine. Yeah. Like, we'll figure a way to make it work.
Go ahead, Anna. Go ahead.
Oh, this whole bike ride has just kind of emphasize we're already really pretty easygoing, flexible people, and this is just totally shown us the importance of that, at least while we're on this bike ride. Like, you have to be flexible.
It's funny. So right now I'm in Ecuador. This is our final few days here with my family. We've been here for 6 weeks, and the point was not a vacation. It was to sort of do normal life in another country and kind of see what it was like. And it's been its own series of challenges. But one of the things, the combination of being down here, as well as since I launched Praxis a couple years ago, having basically no sort of security blanket, no long-term, like once you launch a company, your sort of financial fate is tied to the fate of that company. And most companies, don't know what their revenue is going to be a year, 2, 3 years out. Most of the time it's not even 6 months out. And I've gotten comfortable, totally comfortable actually, with that level of sort of not knowing. It just doesn't worry me at all. And coming down here and seeing things like a beautiful house on the Pacific Ocean in a really nice neighborhood for like $150,000 and just seeing different ways people can live, it sort of makes you realize. I had a Skype call with a young student who is in his senior year of college, and he's just so stressed out about he doesn't know if he has the right skills and he's majoring in the right thing to get a job with a good enough salary. And he's like worried about doing anything for even a few months that he enjoys, that would be interesting to him, that he thinks would be beneficial to him, because what if that cuts into his ability to like earn a living? And I'm trying to tell him, as I'm sitting here like seeing what I see around me here, seeing all the possibilities, knowing people like you traveling the country, to say, look, the bottom is not very far for somebody in the United States today. I mean, there's almost no way that you can like end up out on the street homeless if, it's just your ability to earn enough money to have a decent life is so much greater than most people realize. And I think they end up in jobs that they hate so that they can afford a lifestyle that they don't even like,
Yeah, so true.
My soapbox.
No, I mean,
Very true.
I'm sure it's different down there, but we've been up in your old home state of Michigan, where we were in the Upper Peninsula, and we saw...
Oh. Yeah,
like the Upper Peninsula is like the same price point as like an undeveloped third world country.
Oh no,
but it's beautiful.
It was like
65.
It was 65 grand for like
5-bedroom.
for a 5-bedroom house on like 200 acres or something like that.
Unbelievable. Granted, the house was like kind of falling apart, but
and they didn't have access to they didn't have access to gas, sewage, water, anything like that. But
it sort of lets you know, like, if things get really bad, I can, go somewhere beautiful as long as it has an internet connection for most of us. That's just really cheap. And I can, if nothing else, I can wait it out for a little bit. When you were talking about Missoula, Peter, it reminded me of something really interesting. There's a podcast I really enjoy called the World Wanderers podcast, and it's one of the hosts is actually a participant in Praxis right now. But it's this guy and his girlfriend, and they've traveled all over the world doing all these different things. And they were talking about how different the perspective is when you're in the town where you come from or your hometown versus if you're somewhere else. And so they moved to a really cool sort of mountain town just because they wanted to live there. And one of the hosts, she was working at just like a retail store there or a cafe. And working at a cafe in an awesome town that you moved to because you want to live there, everybody's like, well, that's pretty cool. That's awesome. And I thought of you, Peter, like, I was working at a grocery store in Missoula. Like, okay, you bike across the country, you end up in Missoula for a while, you're working at a grocery store. Everybody I know that knows you, that follows you on Facebook says, oh, that's awesome. That's really cool. Now, imagine if you were in your hometown and you were working at a grocery store, like after you graduated college. Everybody would be like, oh my gosh, Peter's a loser. We were in Mompiche down here in Ecuador, and there was this woman from the Ukraine, and she has a little shop that makes pancakes and sells them there. And like every morning and like lunch and breakfast, she serves pancakes. And there's all these, Mompiche is like a little tiny surfing village here in Ecuador. And if you said, oh yeah, I moved to this surfing village in Ecuador and I have a little house there and I run a little business that brings in an income so that I can live there, everybody would be like, wow, you're awesome. That's impressive. But imagine if you were like, yeah, I live in the town I grew up in and I make pancakes for a living. People would be like, wow, I'm so sorry. Right? Like there's something about going away getting out of your hometown that frees you from all those weird expectations that have nothing to do with whether your life is enjoyable. They just have to do with like your job title. You know what I mean? Yeah, I don't know if you kind of, have you guys felt anything similar to that?
No, I can understand that. Like my family lives in Troutdale, Oregon, which is like this little town, I guess, on the river that's like a half an hour from like Multnomah Falls and these beautiful nature. But yeah, if I was working at a grocery store in Troutdale right now, my family, everyone would be like, he's such a failure.
Right.
What happened? But no, you're right. I guess it's kind of interesting that like as long as you leave home, there's kind of an air of success about you.
Yeah, you have the freedom to define yourself for the first time. I think that's really hard for a lot of people to understand, especially if they grew up in a town that they like. I kind of feel like maybe you can go back if you really want to put down roots there, but like just get out for a few years at least so that you can define yourself in the way that matters to you, not based on other people. When they look at you and say, "Oh, you're working at Foot Locker in the mall," and then they look sad, it's like maybe you're doing that because it gives you the flexibility to do something you love. I don't know. Okay, so let's talk about the nitty-gritty of this life on the road. I mean, I can't bike for more than like 30 minutes without my back hurting and like my groin and my butt are all uncomfortable. I mean, how do you manage just sort of like the comfort level? Like what kind of, are you wearing like biker outfits? Are you wearing like normal clothes? What's the get up and what's the sort of the gear that you have to bring?
I just wear like bike shorts that I got like probably on clearance at some athletic store at some point, and just wear normal t-shirts and like, like board shorts of some sort, just something comfortable. The discomfort from actually cycling within like 2 or 3 days, a lot of that kind of passes. And when I first did my first bike ride, I couldn't do more than 20 or 30 miles in a day, which some people would be like, oh, 30 miles, that's a lot. But if you get up at 7 a.m. and don't go to bed till 9 p.m., you're averaging like 3 miles an hour. Yeah. Like that's actually pretty sad.
Yeah, you're halfway across Oklahoma City,
Yeah. But now we've upgraded our equipment from what we originally had. We had some like bikes that weren't really made for what we were doing that we upgraded when we were in Missoula. And that's where we got the new trailers too. But yeah, for the most part, it's just basic clothing. Yeah. We have bike shoes, but they're not necessary. You could wear tennis shoes.
Do you feel like you're dirty all the time? Like, do you get to shower every day?
Oh no,
Not
we went 2 weeks without showering.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, we had a really bad streak going through Texas just recently. Probably the longest we've ever gone. Yeah. We just couldn't find any there were no couch surfers that we could stay with, and we also didn't have any family or friends. And that's usually where we take showers. Oh, or at campgrounds, but for some reason all the campgrounds we were staying at didn't have showers. So it was ridiculous. I think it was 12 days. It was absurd. We do use baby wipes though.
Yeah, baby wipes are your best friend when it comes to stuff.
So I mean, I know it's not as good as a real shower, but we're not completely disgusting.
I imagine laundry has to be hard too.
We do it whenever we see it. So the hotel we're staying in now, there's laundry downstairs. So I'm gonna do that today.
We probably once a week
advantage
try to find a laundromat or something.
Now, what happens if you're 60 miles from the nearest town and something happens to your bike and it's not rideable anymore? Have you ever been in that situation?
Yes. When we were in Washington State, what went wrong?
Your back wheel, the bearings.
The bearings in my black wheel exploded.
Tried to take. I forget why you were just adjusting it. I think, or something.
Well, so basically we had to take the wheel, attach it, bungee it to the one working bike the whatever amount of town. I think it was 30 miles into town.
Well, I think it was only 20, but of course it was so hilly, and it was a 90-degree day in full sun. It's really we were 20 miles with no equipment, that'll be easy, but it was actually really hard and strenuous. But
so we had to bike into town, get the wheel replaced, bike back to the equipment.
We were biking into Bremer town.
Wait, so you rode one bike into town?
Well, at the time there were actually 3 of us on the bike ride. We had a friend who did the first leg, so she stayed with all of our equipment. Then Anna and I biked into town with the two working bikes. Okay. Got the wheel replaced and then biked back. But that's a very real thing that could happen.
It almost happened on our way into Missoula.
Yeah, it almost happened. Yeah, we were going into Missoula and all the spokes went out on my back wheel.
Oh my gosh.
And literally 2 hours later, Blaine Bennett, who lives in Missoula, happened to be driving on that highway and saw us in a giant truck with a
SUV.
trailer
Yeah.
and took us and all of our equipment into Missoula.
In Missoula, that's called a family sedan.
Oh yeah,
truck.
they were just having a day on the river,
Right.
apparently.
Yeah, they'd been floating and.
I'm picturing you when your friend stayed with your stuff. I'm picturing you driving back after hours on the little moped, like from Dumb and Dumber, like traded in the bike straight up. So, is this forever? Are you just indefinitely going to do this, or do you feel like you're going to stop?
Oh no, this isn't forever. At least the plan right now isn't to be forever. We want to hit every one of the lower 48 states.
Okay.
And we should be done with that by September or October 2017.
Okay.
And then at that point, there's been a lot of cities that we've really liked. And we're thinking of either, if I plan on going back to school, we'll find one, or we'll just find a place where we can have a little more traditional life for a couple of years before our next adventure. And we've talked about everything from hiking the Pacific Crest Trail to biking around Australia to doing Europe. We also want to have a honeymoon at some point. We're thinking about going to Iceland for a couple of weeks.
So your honeymoon is like been places like Orange, Texas.
Yes. Yeah.
Really long honeymoon.
Now, did you get married in the middle of this 2+ years that you've been on the road, or 2 years?
What was that?
Did you get married in the middle of this 2 years that you've been on the road?
Yeah, we got engaged like the first week of the bike ride, and then that summer got married at Burning Man.
Wow. Usually the opposite happens. If you're in close quarters with someone for, a week or two, it's like, all right, this was a bad idea. But you guys, it was love, huh?
Yeah, we kind of figured that if we can like each other at the end of this,
yeah,
we can like each other at the end of anything.
This is pretty, like, in terms of like relationships, this is a fairly stressful way of, because we're not only, we're together like constantly, we have breaks from each other when we're biking, but like I feel like a typical married couple, they probably have jobs at separate workplaces, and they don't necessarily interact like all day every day.
And they don't spend 90% of their downtime in a tent.
Kind of a trial by fire too, because we have a lot of like kind of stressful things happen to us that we have to work through without getting in a fight about it. So
oh man,
we're doing a pretty good job.
That's why I like calling us partners as much as husband and wife, because really we're a good partnership.
Yeah, I mean what you're doing, this venture that you're on, it's you are partners in trying to get to the next city, trying to get to a place to sleep that night or whatever it might be, and I can see that being something that's much easier together than alone. Now, Peter, when you went from DC to LA, were you completely alone?
I was alone for 2/3 of it, and then I met up with a friend for the final third.
What's the difference between doing it alone and doing it with somebody?
When you're alone, you have a lot more flexibility. Like, just because you have, I also had a lot less weight. But you also don't have someone to like throw ideas
Not as
off.
Many Oreos and beer at that time?
Yeah.
No, I'm just kidding. You weren't pulling a dog and dog food, I suspect.
No, not at all. I just had a sleeping bag and a tent and little else.
So you could kind of just change plans at will.
Yeah, at will, but also like I would get in the habit of getting kind of like tunnel visioned, and I wouldn't like kind of stop and smell the roses, so to speak. And Anna's really good about seeing something that's neat and stopping to take a picture and kind of slowing me down. And also it's just good to have another perspective when it's like, do we want to stop at this hotel because of the weather? Or do we want to push on? What are their chances? Like, do we need to find a city to get groceries, or do we want to make sure, like, just keep going for another 30 miles? Like, just having someone that slows you down and that you can bounce ideas off of, I think is made for a much more fulfilling experience.
Now, do you get bored? I mean, if you're riding most of the day, did you ever, or do you still struggle with boredom at all?
I don't. I'm easily entertained, and usually whatever I'm listening to, or sometimes I'm not listening to anything at all, and it's enough to just, listen to the sounds around us.
Yeah.
And,
Not really. Between an Audible account, Spotify, podcasts, comedy albums, and then just like listening to the sounds of nature, it's pretty easy to keep yourself stimulated.
So you're probably going through a good number of books, I would imagine, more than if you were at home, trying to read like most people do, a couple minutes before bed at night or whatever.
Oh no, yeah, I'm going through books a lot faster than I ever did.
I absolutely love audiobooks. Well, now you can listen to yourself on the Isaac Morehouse podcast,
I probably won't because, I hate listening to myself. But.
It's weird how that is, isn't it? What would you say to someone, I don't know, have you ever had anybody say this, that you guys this is just a form of escapism. You're just trying to run away from, whatever, your problems or grown-up life or, the things that a normal person is supposed to do. You're just trying to avoid it. You're just trying to delay reality or escape from it.
Oh man, there's a lot you could say about that. We've actually, someone made an anonymous post about us one time about how we were just hedonists trying to escape adulthood and we were nothing but teenagers and children and stuff like that. I don't know. There's you could challenge a lot of the foundation of what they're saying. Like, what is adulthood? Like, why is avoiding your dreams or staying in one location how we measure someone's success in life? Like, if we're not hurting anyone else and we're enjoying ourselves and creating art when we can and meeting good people, isn't that a successful life?
It's not that we don't have responsibilities on this bike ride. We just have different responsibilities that we've chosen for ourselves. So I would say that we're not trying to avoid... we're not trying to avoid responsibility or being adults. We're just...
we could even flip it back on them and be like, wow, how childish that you always know where you're going to sleep at night and always know what food's going to be in the house. It's just like you're living with your parents. That's the easy way out.
No, it's funny. There's sort of two thoughts. Even when I asked the question, I started to laugh at myself. One is, if this is escapism in sort of the typical way it's used as a negative thing, it's kind of a bizarre way to escape because it sounds like a lot of work. It doesn't sound easy. It's not like you're sitting on the beach, sipping cocktails. But the other one that I've always thought, I love the idea of escapism. If you're in a reality that sucks, why would you not want to escape it to something better, mentally, physically, or both? I mean, if you're in prison, you don't want to just numb yourself to it so that you can survive. You want to always be thinking about what's on the other side, and you want to find a way to get out there. If you're not happy, you should escape. I
was going to say, I don't think there's anything wrong with escapism. I think we do it all the time. Everyone that turns on a TV show or reads a book or goes on vacation for 2 weeks, they're doing mini escapism.
Yeah.
And we've just found a way to implement some of that escape into our daily life in a way where we get to meet new people, see new places, go through cities that no one has traveled through. Like we were on a road recently and just this lady pulls over and just asks if we're lost. Like the assumption being you're here and I don't know you, therefore something's wrong.
And then you slowly turned and you said, not all who wander are lost. Would you say that, well, I'll put it this way. What type of person would you recommend an extended bike trip like this to?
I mean, anyone that's unhappy where they are now. I think a lot of people put too much focus on needing the right equipment, needing the right savings account, being prepared, or knowing something about being out in the world. It's like, no, just take the first step out your door, and a lot of that falls into place, and you learn a lot. We live in an age where I can pull up my phone, and if I need to know how to start a fire, I just pull up YouTube and look at it. Like, all the information in the world is at your fingertips. So if you're unhappy where you are, I set off with nothing more than about $1,000 on my bank account for that first bike ride, which is not a lot in the grand scheme of things to live off of for 2.5 months.
And you don't have to do it through biking. We ran into a couple that was exploring Oregon in their VW bus, right? So, and we've run into other people that are traveling the country in different ways, like on a motorcycle or in a converted van or...
Yeah, I met a guy that was hitchhiking across the country with his 2 dogs. And, just, if you're unhappy where you are, just go try something else. Worst case scenario, you go back to where you were and you're still at the status quo. Like, you haven't made your life worse.
And I would even say it's almost impossible, even if you go back, a couple weeks in, a couple months in, and, this isn't working, I have to go back. You're going to be a different person. You're going to have something. You're going to have gained something. Even if the time was sucky and it was hard, it will have changed you in ways that are beneficial just by going after it, just by learning for yourself. Instead of having reasons to not do it that are purely theoretical, having reasons based on experience. Okay, I learned that this was too hard. I don't want to do it this way. There's so much value. There's so much value to that. So what do you have in terms of, do you have any recommendations for podcasts, books, things that have been really influential for you that you would recommend to our listeners to check out?
Yeah. I don't know, for me, like, I like listening to funny podcasts like Sawbones, which is about medical history, or The Adventure Zone, which is 4 guys playing D&D together. That's hilarious. But also, like, Tim Ferriss's podcast is always super inspiring.
Yeah, it's a good one.
He always has fantastic people on there. And reading Tim Ferriss's 4-Hour Workweek, as much as it sounds like an infomercial that you'd see at 3 o'clock in the morning or something, it's actually a really interesting book that gives a good philosophy about how valuable your time is, and to stop focusing on possessions, instead focus on experiences. There's a book called The Guide to the Good Life, which is an introduction to Stoic philosophy, which has been super impactful for me. Like, just kind of, he goes through like the, ancient Greek and Roman Stoic philosophers, and then stuff that they recommended to improve your life, like, doing negative visualization, imagining what you would do if the worst thing in the world happens to you. And that's something I go through a lot. Like, I'll be biking and be like, okay, what would happen if, God forbid, a car hit Anna right now? Or what happens if my leg broke or something terrible happened? How would I handle that? And by going through that visualization and realizing that you'll be okay, then it's not as scary to go out in the world and take risks.
Yeah, so you're going to have to author a book, Stoicism and the Art of Bicycle Maintenance.
Yes. I probably should. One of the many books I want to write.
I hope we write a book about it.
Yeah, do you plan to write about your experiences?
Yeah, we've gone through a couple of ideas on how we want to tackle that, because we do definitely want to create something. We've thought about doing more of an instructional guide for people that are cycling as a couple or with a dog, unlike long-term cycling, because there's a lot of stuff out there for doing a cross-country ride, but it's like, this is a little bit different.
And I feel like you could, I don't know, I haven't checked, but I feel like you could dominate the niche cycling long-term with a dog. I don't know how many books are on that, but you could probably be the experts.
Yeah. No, and we probably would be. We've had to make up a lot of the stuff with having Higgins here as we go, because there's not a lot of experience with doing it with a dog.
You have to teach that dog to pedal so you can ride in the,
there's been times he loves to be in the lead. So we've had some pretty steep hills where we'll attach him to the front of the bike and he'll pull us up the
that's
hill.
Great. I love it.
Yeah, okay. He's a strong dog too.
All right. So Peter and Anna, how can people follow you, find out more about you? Are you on Twitter, website, anything like that?
We have a Facebook page called Shifts and Higgles, SHIFTS, shifts like shifting, and Higgles, our dog, HIGGLES. So we've got a Facebook page and an Instagram page by the same name that we do some blog posting, a little bit of blog posting, a lot of photos, any interesting articles that relate to what we're doing. And you can always find at least me on Facebook. Just be my friend.
Anna laughs. Are you kind of rolling your eyes as he posts everything that happens in your life onto Facebook? My wife does that to me sometimes.
Yeah, she is. You know this. I'm way public on Facebook.
Yeah, so am I.
More than I should be. By the way, did Heather ever go surfing?
Oh, nope. Hasn't done it. I mean, there's hopefully we'll do an episode in the next couple of days here about recapping our trip here, but I can't blame her too much considering some of the different illnesses and adventures we've faced as a family.
Fair enough. I just listened to that podcast a week ago, I guess. And
she has not yet. We will see. Hey, Peter and Anna, this has been absolutely awesome. You guys can go to Shifts and Higgles on Facebook or Instagram. You can also find Peter directly on Facebook if you want to. And when you guys write that book, and Anna, you're on Facebook as well. You're okay with people finding you there?
Yeah, that's totally
Even
fine.
that you're not as out there as Peter, but you're still okay with people.
Yeah, I don't really post a lot. I'm not as entertaining. You should probably, if you're there for entertainment, friend Peter, because he posts way more than I do.
Just sit there with some popcorn when he's having a beer and Oreo party and just follow it live. It's amazing.
Hey man, finding out Oreos were vegan was the best day of my life.
Thank you guys so much for coming on the podcast.
Hey, thanks Isaac. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks for having us.